At the start of the legislative session, more than a few news stories mentioned the majority of representatives would be women for the first time in New Mexico's history. And Senator Mimi Stewart beat out challengers to assume the mantle of President Pro Tem, a powerful position that influences committee appointments. But it was Senator Stewart, who was no shrinking violet certainly, who called a Thursday night exchange with fellow Democrat Daniel Ivey Soto an abusive line of inquiry as she presented her mandatory sick leave bill. We have the debate linked online at newmexicoinfocus.org. I encourage you to see this if you have not seen it, that exchange. A number of male senators called it disgraceful or embarrassing for Mr. Ivey Soto, and Liz Stefanik called it bullying. In fact, the Senate recessed for half an hour to cool off. It was clear from the get-go that this was going to be contentious, but did Senator Ivey Soto cross the line? Inez, I'll start with you.
Well, I actually was watching it as it happened because I couldn't sleep and I was curious what was going on in judiciary. And I remember watching it thinking, oh my gosh, he's not stopping. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't that he was abusive in the sense that he was calling her names or being rude that way. It's just that he kept asking the same question over and over, and he had the answer and he didn't move on.
Right.
And it was, I said in a tweet at the time, there's questioning to elicit information and there's questioning to badger. Mm-hmm. This is badgering. Will someone stop it? And what I wondered is, where was Howie Morales, who was running the Senate session? He did say we need to be civil, but nothing like saying, let's move on. And when Liz Stefanik stood up behind Mimi Stewart and said, this is bullying, it was just one of those moments that you thought, wow, I'm not alone in seeing that this is a little too much. Mm-hmm. And it was very, very uncomfortable. And I cannot imagine what it was like to be in the room. And Senator Stewart was so firm, never wavered, and never got angry. And I don't know how she kept her cool. I was really impressed.
Mm-hmm. Jessica, when you think about it, she was being treated as a hostile witness when you kind of, break it down in the idea that, she's the most powerful woman in the Senate. Something was just out of balance here. Well, how did you view this?
Well, and as I was watching it as it was happening, and I think that the first thing that came to me was the sense of decorum, right? We conduct these sessions as bodies, representatives of our own communities, and the thought is that they will do so in a respectful manner. So that's the first thought that came to my mind as well as I was watching this. And I kudos to Mimi Stewart as well. Like Inez said, she did keep her cool, and she was standing her ground as she did it. So that was impressive to see. But I think that one of the big takeaways from that exchange was just, it's more than just about passion. And I think that Senator Soto came back and said, hey, this is something I'm passionate about. And that's why I got heated and continued to with my line of questioning.
How did that response work for you? Senator Ivey Soto's response.
So the follow-up to all of this is really this idea of how women are disproportionately treated in bodies like this. And as a woman, I think any woman, professional woman in any private or public sector wants to know that they are going to receive the same level of respect and treatment as their male colleagues. And we want to see that from our public bodies as well. I looked at it as bullying, definitely, not necessarily on the status of her sex, but most definitely on the status of the power that she holds within that body.
Andy, Jessica mentioned just a second ago about standing her ground, and that was not without irony, because I seem to recall, and we all did as we were watching, Mr. Ivey Soto demanding that Ms. Stewart stand, during this whole thing was like, whoa, hang on now. Something seems to have taken a turn here. And, again, this idea of badgering. Now, we understand that standing while you're giving testimony on the Senate floor is the way it's done. But demanding someone stand, I can't recall that ever happening in my time. It's not forever, but I can't recall. Can you recall any time you've ever seen something like that?
No, not in that same way. I did see a few times this session where you see somebody speaking and you could tell somebody off camera said, hey, reminded them to stand up. I think it seemed there was a more common this time because I think people were so used to Zooming in for committee meetings and that sort of thing. So I think there was a lot of people that just sort of slipped their mind that, I'm on the Senate floor. I have to stand up when I speak. But no, to answer your question more directly, I don't remember a specific time where the person sort of asking the questions says, hey, you got to stand up to do this.
Yeah. Dan Boyd, have you ever witnessed anything like that in your time?
It was, I was actually in the Senate chamber when it all happened, and I can certainly tell you, you could feel the tension in the room, even at 1 o'clock in the morning or whenever it was. It was late.
It was late. Yep.
My take is I think there'd been these tensions building during the session. Some male senators have kind of a very hard-hitting way of questioning even other legislators, and kind of almost prosecutorial sometimes. And I think that had been building some tension, and it spilled over. It boiled over that night. I don't think it's something that's going to just blow away. I think we're going to be seeing more about this. And I think it is this has maybe been the culture of the Senate. And now with more women and a more diverse chamber, I think there's going to be kind of a bit of a reckoning. And I'm not sure exactly how that's all going to play out. But I think certainly with more women now in the legislature, that some of these old ways of doing things are being challenged.
Mm-hmm. Dan, staying with you for a second, is there any downside for Misty Ivy Soto politically? I mean, Mimi Stewart is very powerful. She, like I mentioned, and she doles out committee seat assignments. Any risk here for Mr. Ivy Soto?
Yeah, I certainly think there is. Mm-hmm. We'll see how it all blows out. I think, I had heard some suggestions about possible censure or acts like that. He's also the chairman of the Senate Rules Committee, and Mimi Stewart is the pro tem who decides committee assignments. So that's kind of to be continued what happens there. Mm-hmm. I think he insisted that it wasn't a sexist or but just that he's passionate about issues. But I think the way he came across and the response we saw from other senators, kind of suggested, and especially other female senators suggested, that they kind of shared her response or her view of how that all went down.
Mm-hmm. Jessica, interesting when I think about this as well in my mind's eye, I think about that exchange. One of the things that was really interesting to me is that she didn't want to yield to his questioning. She refused. She wanted to bag out of it. And it seems like we don't have a system up there where if a politician is feeling attacked, where it just bring it to a halt personally. And to go back to Inez's point, the presiding officer, so to speak, has to step in there. He said a couple of times, "Oh man, just cool it down." What could he have done to stop this? Could he really, really gotten after Mr. Ivy Soto in a much more vigorous way?
I think to go back to what Dan said, which is we are talking about bodies that are really based in tradition, right? Yes, it is his job to maintain order in that chambers particularly. But hindsight is 2020. As Dan said, again, there was a lot of tension in the room. Everybody was feeling it. Perhaps he wasn't thinking at the moment that this is something I need to intercede in. Rather, he was thinking this is the way that our democracy works, debate. And as a member of the public body, it's her job to receive these questions and answer them as best she can. I wouldn't be surprised if we do come now with that hindsight, that we do come back with some thoughts on how to reform some of these items. What do these procedures look like? What do you do if you are as a legislator feeling bullied or attacked, or even if these debates just don't go anywhere, right? We were talking about how he's asking the same question over and over, refusing to acknowledge the answer, and that doesn't further the discussion at all. So I definitely think there was more he could have done in the moment, but I think that's the nature of hot heads, and that's the nature of debate in the moment.
There you go. Inez, real quick, just a reminder, it was 2 regular sessions ago. We had really the original Me Too moment up in the legislature, but it involved lobbyists. And yes. I'm wondering if that is in the background of all this, that this has been on slow boil to medium boil, now high boil for a lot of women, starting with that lobbying situation 2 years ago, and it just sort of exploded here. Do you agree with that's mixed in here as well?
I do think so. And I think that the influx of younger women who maybe haven't put up with sexist behavior for 20 or 30 years of their career, we've kind of reached a bulk where people can say, hey, we're not going to do this way anymore. And they're going to be kind of the backup for the women who have, been alone in the Senate and only had one bathroom and not had the support they needed.
Yep.
So I really think that when you get enough different kinds of people in a House or Senate, then the procedures are going to change, whether you want them to or not. It's moving.
Yeah, there you go. We're out of time on this one. This group is back in a few minutes with a look at how good government measures fared.